Now we recently get used to start with questions or comments. So does anybody have any particular questions or point of discussion?
May I have a question, please?
Sure.
Dr. Ghanoush, I'm sure that you're a very dedicated student of the Quran. Have you found any language in the Quran that would indicate some kind of a preferential treatment of Muslims over non-Muslims? And can, for example, if I am claiming to be a Muslim, do I have some superiority or somebody else, all other things being equal, to claim that kind of superiority?
That's a good question. No, we always have to go back to the foundations of our religion and the founding principles of it. Now we know that humanity is just one large family, which means that people, before they are Muslims or non-Muslim, they are members of one family. So they are brothers and sisters in humanity. It happens to be a very large family, but still it is a family. And Quran emphasized that. And in a family, there is no superiority. So we need to emphasize the fact that people are, first of all creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all members of the same family. Quran says in Surah Al-Hujurat, يَا النَّاسُ إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَىٰ وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. That we created you from one pair of male and female, and we made you into nations and tribes so that you get to know each other. So the verse is very clear, and they consider this one of the fundamental verses or foundational verses. The verse is very clear in the fact that people are made different, but not better than one another. We created you from a single pair of male and female and made you into nations and tribes that you may know each other. Verily, the most honored of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. So clearly that all people are members of the same family. Now they have different ranking, but that's in the sight of Allah, which nobody knows. And what is this ranking is based upon, it is based on piety and good deeds, righteous deeds, not on what you claim. Someone can claim to be Muslim and causing a lot of problems and damage on earth. Somebody else who is not Muslim is doing a lot of good. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hold them accountable, that's none of our business. We don't know. The hisab is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reserved for himself exclusively. So the verse says people are equal. They were made different so that they get to know each other. And then their ranking in the sight of Allah is based on taqwa, which nobody can measure and you cannot even tell your own taqwa, your own piety, never mind to measure the piety of anybody else. And that leads to a point that we should not even busy ourselves with this. Who is better? Who is going to heaven? Who's going to hell? This is not something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not only He did not assign to us, He said He reserved for Himself exclusively. So when we get into that point, we are interfering with something that Allah reserved for Himself exclusively. So we shouldn't busy ourselves with it, with this. What we should focus on is our duties and obligations, which are essentially to develop ourselves into a role model and to maximize our contribution to the greater good, our positive impact on people. When interacting with people, we have to remember that they are our brothers and sisters in humanity. They are our fellow citizens. They are our neighbors. They are our colleagues. So many things we have in common. And then when it comes to difference in religion, we just have to understand each other, accept each other, and then see what can we do together for the greater good. That's it. That's where it should end. Unfortunately, there are some schools, some movements, some groups who are focusing too much on this, which is appointing themselves as judges and busying themselves with classifying and categorizing people and classifying them who is better than whom, etc. So my strong recommendation is to abandon completely this judgmental attitude, to be busy, to mind our own business, and to focus on the big job that Allah has assigned to us. It's a huge one. It's humongous. We really have no time to waste. Job, again, to develop yourself into a role model that requires so much work. To work on your worship, to work on your character, to work on your knowledge, to work on your skills, to work on everything. Allah wants to see you stronger and better version of yourself every day. That's requires a lot of work. And then there is the other field, which is how can you impact people around you? That requires a lot of work, sharing your knowledge, sharing your experience, advice, etc. So that, and learning from them. And then the other track, which is how to make this world a better place for everybody. And that should be enough for people, more than enough for people to busy themselves with. And Quran is very clear when he said, when Quran says that you were the best community first sent to humanity. It's not best community to be arrogant or to feel superior, but you were the best community that when you are serving humanity. And then Quran immediately says, because you enjoin that which is good and forbid that which is evil, which means that you are not better than others because of who you are, but because of what you do. So as long you fulfill this mission, you can be special people, but you are not the chosen people, or you are not the better people regardless of what you do. It's not. Quran very clear. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر, that it is fulfilling this great mission of serving the greater good. That's what أمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر. It's a أمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر, enjoining that which is good, meaning that wherever you settle, you make that place a better place by promoting and defending anything good that is in that society, and by joining hands with the other good people to work to reduce and minimize and hopefully even eliminate anything that is destructive or damaging. So that's, again, should stay away from judgmental attitude, and we should never feel that we are superior or we are better. We should always remember that there is a great mission that Allah is inviting everybody to fulfill it. And those who fulfill that mission, they have some special status, but that's that status is not feeling of superiority. It's basically it's leading by serving and leading by example. That's what Muslims should realize, that they were invited to lead by serving and to lead by example.
As a related follow-up, a friend who has a grown-up son, and the grown-up son has chosen to marry a person or a girl who is not Muslim. And this friend is having reservation and objection that the son would get married to a girl who is not Muslim. Do you think that that's probably out of line?
The marriage is a very different thing. My view on marriage is very clear. It's not about, because if you think about Islamically, that's Muslims are allowed to marry like Christians and Jews. But I see it even from a different angle. People, when they get married, they should emphasize compatibility. And having different faith, it's increases the risk of failure of the marriage and increases the problem that the couple will face. So it's not even two Muslims or two people from same religion, still they have to maximize the shared views and thoughts and commonalities and compatibility. And I don't recommend this marriage across religion, not because it's bad or because, even if it is lawful, just because when people are getting married, they should try to maximize compatibility, reduce the risk of failure, reduce the challenges that they're going to face. Two people having different religions, they have a child, everybody wants the child to follow their religion. So that's an extra problem that you could have avoided. You didn't have to face. So for marriage, even marriage, we have even problems between people marry Muslim couples married, but without due process, without taking time to know each other very well and to make sure that there is a reasonable level of compatibility, and marriages end up failing. So from that perspective, I strongly recommend to people to try to avoid this kind of marriage, simply to minimize the risk of failure and minimize the challenges that the couple are going to face anyway.
Sheikh, can I just say something real quick about this topic?
Sure.
I'm just talking from my own experience. I married with the non-Muslim, and at first she has no problem, but then we have more and more challenge, especially since she's from the Catholic background. So I'm agreeing with you 200% and supporting you, in this matter, because especially with me being as a, used to be immigrant before, it's hard. I'm just by myself, and she's with the rest of uncle and aunties. So it's very challenging. So now we have two kids, and unfortunately we have to deal with this. So, and the good thing is, before we got married, I got her sign up that to agree that the children will be raised up with the Islamic teaching. So I have the proof and documents. Alhamdulillah, my sheikh was doing the excellent job in protecting my future generation. I just want to comment to you on that, and I just want to say thank you. You bring up this matter and supporting that opinion. Jazakallah khair, barakallah. I'm sorry.
Great. That's a good example. You can see. So please, my recommendations for our community to take this marriage business very seriously, and to take the steps, the premarital counseling, to really be frank and talk to each other, make sure that the couple have time to discuss their future plans, discuss their opinions, and in that context, having one less problem to deal with, it's always better, because now the marriage itself is risky, is big challenge, may or may not work. There is a lot of problems that people face to find a formula to deal with it one another. Why adding an extra problem? That's not only religion, by the way. It might be religion, maybe social status. It might be anything that creates or brings an extra challenge to it. Might be culture, might be from the same religion, but very different culture. I strongly recommended people not to marry parents, not to encourage their children who are born and raised here to marry someone from their original country. That's not good. You are setting these people for failure. Somebody was born and raised in America and somebody who has never been in America, and then you try to get them to marry each other, you're setting them for failure. It may work, but you need a miracle to make it work. So why you're adding problem to something that is challenging to begin with? It is risky. The chance there is a chance that the marriage will work or will not work, even if you try to maximize the chances for it to succeed. But to come in the middle and add an extra problem of different religions, different culture, different social status, different level of education, why you're adding these problems to something that is already challenging? And we have seen it. We have seen when the level of education is very different, marriage, the chances for marriage to succeed is very weak. Sometimes social status, sometimes, again, I mentioned the culture problem. Why? I mean, they can point to one exception that has succeeded, but exceptions, you cannot rely on exceptions. Again, let's make sure that future generation take this marriage business very seriously. I made a very long series of Jumu'ah sermon Fridays on marriage, that starting from the pre-marital, make sure that the future spouses are mature enough, that they already settled on what they want to do in life. Their identity is coherent. They're not people who are still lost and still don't know what they're going to do. Take your time, and then that's maturity, and then compatibility. Make sure that you offer them, you provide them the setting so that they get to know each other very well, to minimize surprises, because every now and then we're still hearing that people are surprised after marriage. So I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Why? Let's reduce that by being so open about I encourage even parents sometimes to, if there are some issues with their son or their daughter, just to be frank, say that he has or she has anger problem. Be frank from the beginning. Just put it there so that people will not be surprised. So that's maturity and compatibility, and then seeking professional counseling, premarital, that's very important. Then taking time before having children, because separation before children is always much easier. Take time to prepare for children if the couple think that things are working and they're ready, because that's a different challenge to be parents. So a lot of time our community are still taking all of these things haphazard. So marrying haphazardly, bringing children without any preparation, etc. So let's make sure that people have premarital counseling, and then they take their time to know whether this is working or not before having children, and then to prepare for children, because that's a new role and new responsibility that you're going to take, which is to be parent. First of all, there is a responsibility to be spouse. That's something that you have to learn. It's a very delicate job. It's a very challenging, it's not easy. People nowadays are taking that job without any learning, without any nothing. So being spouse needs a lot of preparation, to read about the other gender, to read about spousal relationship, to read about sexual health, to read about so many things. And then to be parents, it's a new job completely. That's basically the series was about this, about those phases and how they should be taken like that, so that we reduce the risk of failure of marriage, and we reduce at least this unfortunate situation of separation after having children. And that's something that should be reduced to the minimum, because there is a time where people can gauge whether this is going to work or not. And if it is not working, they'd rather separate before having children.
May I add something, Dr. Anushi?
Yes.
I mean, I speak for experience, 3 divorces, and witnessed very difficult conditions with friends. I support everything you said, and I will add something to it. In this country, especially people with property, rich people, it has become popular to have prenuptial agreements. This is rich people who marry ladies. Basically, I'm talking about men marrying ladies, thinking that maybe she's in for the money, right? So what do? They go for prenuptial agreement. I think these people are smarter than us, because they think about that. Their only concern is the money. Our main concern should be the future generation. So I heard a couple of things I liked. Everything you said is correct. The brother who mentioned having basically prenuptial agreement as far as raising the children as Muslims, or even it should even include what happens if we separate, who takes the children, because if you don't, the courts in this country will kick in and they will decide what to do. And I'm speaking now from expert knowledge. So I support taking the time. I support compatibility, cultural compatibility. Yes, 100%. And we Muslims in America have not addressed this with enough seriousness. Let me just put that. And we need to. I don't know how. Problem is, people, when they decide to get married, it's all emotional. It has to do with love and attraction. And we're young. Sometimes we are immigrants. I was an immigrant once, and my first marriage lasted 9 months, and she had become a Muslim. So, yes. Thank you for raising this issue. Thank you for everything you said. And my only thing I want to add is we need to address this issue with more seriousness. And I hope that our young generation coming in here, including my own children, need to understand that this decision needs to be taken extremely seriously. And hopefully should get them to agree that please get the counseling, professional counseling, before you make the final decision.
I said this before. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we are, it's not only Muslims. We are facing an attack, a systematic attack on the establishment, on the institution of marriage in the Western society. And we Muslims are no different, except that we Muslims, most of us, the ones who are, real Muslims, care about their religion. We think about our children, our legacy, basically, and this should be our main concern. It's not the money. Money comes and goes. And I appreciate the question, and this is going to be an ongoing issue. And thank you.
I said a long time ago, and I still believe, firmly believe that every Islamic center should have a solid family counseling and youth counseling. A lot of us, a lot of the people who are managing the community, they thought once they have the building and they have those basic activities that the needs for the community are satisfied. That's not true. And then the only thing they may think about is expanding the building or purchasing a larger one or whatever. Marital counseling should be there in every Islamic center. and youth counseling should be there, should be minimum service of youth counseling and married family counseling. And if there are people who are true leaders in those mosques, they should plan ahead, and they should be even sponsor members of the community to go into these fields with an arrangement or agreement for them to come and serve at least number of years in that Islamic center. Or when I was in charge of one of those organizations, I started the discussion about even national initiative of having some sort of endowment and supporting and sponsoring members of the community, young members of the community, to specialize in the fields that the community needs badly, with some arrangement for them to serve like number of years in mosques or Islamic centers. So family counseling, youth counseling, and youth centers, or those facilities, because nowadays a lot of Islamic centers, they are not youth friendly, because there is hardly anything for young people to do. They are still geared and oriented toward adult immigrants or immigrant adults, not even family friendly. Many Islamic centers are not really very accommodative to families, and of course not youth friendly. So unfortunately, we did not continue in that path of community development, that the development of the community is not about having a building, a worship place, or probably even an Islamic school. The community development is a lot more than that. And the needs for a community that is who decided to settle are much bigger than a community, transient community who is here for few years, and then they're planning to go home. So back to marriage, compatibility, at least want to make sure that the major elements are compatible, because even after that, there is something called personality compatibility. Compatibility between the two persons. They may be from the same religion, same culture, similar level of education. So a lot of commonalities, yet the two persons are not compatible. So why adding one of these big tickets, big problems to the mix, when you know that even with all these major elements similar and shared, we still have the risk of having lack of compatibility between the two personalities. They're just very different. The way they think, their priorities, their perspective, it's very different.
Can I ask a question, Dr. Ghannouchi?
Sure.
I'm from Afghanistan, and back there, you know, I know that there was something we had heard that almost like a requirement in terms of marriage, you know, for the couple to be of, you know, we used to call it ham kufu. It's probably an Arabic term, but I don't know if there is something like that is in Islam saying to be of the same kufu. Is that a term that's applicable in any way, or the same as compatibility?
I think it has some sort. It means compatibility. Kufu is someone who is a match. The translation of kufu is match. So someone who's a good match, and that's definitely the case. Some girls are very mature and very, you don't want to get them to marry someone who's really lost or shaky, and vice versa. So kufu is someone who's a good match. And as I mentioned some examples, level of education is very important. You can't have someone with a very highly educated married someone with a very basic education or no education at all. You are setting these people for failure, because you're making communication difficult. That's not kufu. That's not a match. So match or compatible, they're very similar. I hope that people, whether in Afghanistan or anywhere, I hope that they mean what they say, meaning they take it seriously. And when they're thinking about a match, they think about all these aspects, that this is really a good match. And that's why I know Adam Centers are one of the centers I'm not sure about others, but one of the centers who's doing at least some good efforts for premarital. There is something going on. I'm not aware of all the details, but I know there is some effort and some service that the mosque is offering to the community in that regard. And that's something that really need to be appreciated and encouraged, commended, that and should be really generalized, that should be staple in every Islamic center. There is premarital counseling, there is family counseling, and there is a youth counseling. And it's not difficult. The resources are there. If there is leadership with vision, it can be done. It can be implemented. It can be done. It requires a little bit of planning. And as I said, it may be local, it may be regional initiative, it can be even national initiative to start sponsoring and encouraging people to specialize in those fields and start filling those Islamic centers with this kind of expertise, because at the end of the day, family is the bedrock of the society, even not only the community. And it is about time to stop this vicious cycle of people getting married haphazardly, raising children haphazardly. Those children are not prepared for marriage, and then and the cycle goes on. This cycle has to be broken sooner rather than later, when you start preparing people for marriage and then supporting them during marriage, and then preparing them to be parents and supporting them in that role, so that we start really, we break this vicious cycle and we start the synergetic cycles of family, very coherent families, raising successful children and preparing them to raise even better family, to build and better families.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Nidal. Actually, this is a very important topic, and my wife and I were talking about this topic like 1 hour ago, and we raised a topic which is, so my son is 13 or 14, and we were talking about
Nidal, we lost you.
Okay, how about now?
Yeah, you can back.
Okay. So we were talking about, my kid is 13, and we were talking about, I know we're talking in advance about how we can help him find the good wife that, as you said, they match. So we're talking about, do we need to kind of help him think about someone who speaks Arabic and she lives outside the US, or someone who lives in the US and she knows she lives in the same culture. So we didn't find the solution, or I know we need to read, but I would like to thank you for the tips that you gave, and for our brothers who shared their experience. So thank you so much for that. Another point is, and I was listening to the beginning of this conversation, and Dr. Ghannouchi, you said something very important. The combination between working on ourselves, and being better people, being a better person, our knowledge, our financial, our health, all of these things, and on the other hand, having the impact on others' life and fulfilling our mission in life, and become khayru ummah ukhrijat linnas, help people and show the beauty of Islam and all of these great things. The question is how to balance. I know we can show the beauty of Islam while we are working in companies. I know with our education we can show the beauty of our deen as well, and call people for Islam, to Islam, and have our impact in our life. However, what I struggle with is that I think we need to dedicate time to our self-development and getting more income, more money, and time for, let's say, da'wah. And even for you, Dr. Ghannouchi, you have your full-time job, you educate yourself, you have your career, and all of these good things. However, when you come to khutbah al-Jum'ah or to this class, you prepare for that. You read more in order to be able to answer questions. You prepare for khutbah. So you dedicate time for your personal life, and you dedicate time for da'wah or impacting people's life. And how to balance. If you have any tips for that, that would help a lot.
Great. Jazakallah khair. First of all, this balance is a challenge that is going to be with us for life. And there is hardly any time any one of us will reach a point where say, my life is perfectly balanced. And even if you reach that point, just wait, maybe the next day you will find yourself thrown off balance because of the challenges of life. So let's accept that reality, that having balance in our life between all our roles and responsibilities and duties, it's a lifelong struggle. It's not something that there is a quick solution that we follow it and our lives will be perfectly balanced. It's not going to happen. So every now and then we're going to be thrown off balance. But as long you are trying, it's like khushu'a in salah, concentration in salah, in prayer. You will never have perfect concentration in prayers. But as long you're trying, as long you are resisting the temptation to be distracted and to be thinking or planning while you are praying, as long you are trying, you're still in good shape. The moment you abandon, you give up, and you start saying Allahu Akbar and then thinking and planning, and your mind is totally somewhere else, then that becomes a problem. Same thing for balance. As long you don't abandon any of your roles, every now and then something is going to lag behind and needs a push and need to make adjustments. So it's like a driving. You know, you always keep making those small adjustments, and sometimes even large one, so that to avoid any problems or accidents. So let's accept that one. Now, when it comes to tips, there is really no one size fits all. What I strongly recommend, number one, is eliminate waste of time from your life. Without this, because it's like money. In order to be good financially, in good shape financially, don't think about making more money. First of all, stopping waste of money. Same thing works with time. Eliminate the waste of time. And alhamdulillah, for a long time ago, I eliminated this, something that is like I'm doing nothing. Even if I'm in doctor clinic waiting for my turn, I'm doing something, I'm reading, I'm doing this. Waiting or wasting time should be eliminated. Unfortunately, this is easier said than done, because I know there are a lot of people who waste a lot of time either on TV or surfing the net or on social media. So eliminating waste of time, because if you think about it, the time under your control is very short. You remove the time of sleep, the time of work, there is really a couple hours that you're controlling every day. So you really have to be very stingy with your time and manage them very, very strictly. That's number one. Number two, planning. Planning, meaning scheduling, can help a lot, because living without a schedule, that can open the door for waste of time. Trying to have a schedule and try to stick to it religiously. The time you go to sleep, the time you wake up, the time for reading, time for this, time for family, time for every, as the prophets said, فَآتِ كُلَّ ذِي حَقٍّ حَقَّهُ وَإِنَّ لِأَهْلِكَ عَلَيْكَ حَقٌّ وَإِنَّ لِجَسَدِكَ عَلَيْكَ حَقٌّ. يعني give everybody their dues, even your own body, your family, everything. So planning. Efficiency. We all know that nowadays you're going to have to, because of the limited time, because of the tremendous responsibilities, especially for someone who want to live a life bigger than their own life. Like the people in this session here, people who are embracing Islam as a life mission. They want to really do good. They are not just thinking about their own life, but they want to contribute to the greater good. They want to. So these people, they have to be very efficient, not only very stingy with time, but also very efficient. So gaining a lot of those skills of time management, electronic skills, the agenda, scheduling, any skill that you learn can save you time. I mentioned this, and I'm going to mention again, because I think this is, first of all, personal experience. And I know how much, I cannot imagine how much time it saved me. Something that I have done in 1990, maybe. Yeah, 1990 or 89 even, 1990. I came to this country, start taking courses. Courses requires papers. At that time, there was no laptops. Computers, there was computer center in the university, and you go, you register your name, and then take your turn to use the computer. And then at that time, I was typing with one finger. So it took me more time to type the paper than to prepare it. So I asked, is this something common? They said, yeah, almost every course in this country, you have a project or paper for which you need to type. So I said, this is not going to work. I need to have a solution for this. So I was walking by the bookstore and found learning typing 30 lessons in 30 days. Purchased that book, probably $10, I think. And applied those lessons. First of all, everybody around me told me it's hopeless. We tried these things, they don't work. You know what, in our culture, unfortunately, people, they don't do good and they don't even let you do something different. But I did not listen. I continued. 30 days, applied those 30 lessons. By the end of that month, I was typing with all my fingers without even looking. And you can imagine from 1990 till now, how much I did, and professionally and writing. I published a couple books. You can imagine how much time I saved every day because of that skill that was learned at that time. Just to tell you a real world example, real life example, any skills that you gain can save you a lot of time, especially when it comes to the tasks that you do them regularly. Even if you save a couple minutes every day, or that skill will save you 5 minutes a day, that's going to pile up. So increasing efficiency, scheduling, eliminating waste of time, having clear priorities, and discipline. This idea of staying late at night is very bad, because that time is not really productive at all compared to the early time in the morning. And if you ask around you, you'll find that the most successful people are the people who are the 5 a.m. club. the people who wake up, and my own understanding, humble understanding, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prescribed Salat al-Fajr, Fajr prayer, for us to wake up and stay awake. More than likely. Of course, we cannot say for sure, but that's when I think that part of the wisdom was meant for people to have that time to wake up so that they can remain awake, not to pray and go to sleep. Because that time is very blessed time. And we all know how much you can achieve in the early hours of the day compared to the late hours in the day. These are few tips. Knowledge and skills can help saving time. Those who read about spousal relationships will eliminate a lot of time wasted in problem between spouses. Those who read about parenting will eliminate a lot of problems and a lot of time wasted in disputes with their children, in raising their children. The more knowledge, the more skills you gain, the more efficient you become. And that will help you balancing. Plus, pray for barakah. And I firmly believe that Allah can bless people's time or money so that they can do a lot more than others with the same amount of time or the same amount of money. That's barakah. That's blessing. If Allah put blessing in your time, you find yourself capable of achieving a lot more with the same amount of time, a lot more than others. I saw people making similar amount of money, but some are living much better life. Barakah. Allah blesses wealth, especially if it is pure and lawful and etc. So same thing for time. Pray that Allah will put bless your time, so that you will be spared a lot of things that usually can consume time or waste your time, and you can achieve more with the same amount of time. Yes, Brother Muhammad.
I have a follow-up question, basically, on the same issue, which I'm very happy with discussing. And every time I join here, I learn something very important. I want to thank you and everyone else organizing this weekly meeting. I have 2 children at the age of marriage. In my case, I made sure that they were raised back home, and they would only come to this country at the age of 18, thinking that this will spare them a lot of conflict, basically. But this new generation is very resistant to the idea of parents helping them choose or make decisions about who they will marry.
That's absolutely true.
And if anybody has any good ideas, it may be too late for me. They're already 28, 27, 28. If anyone has some good ideas to help me and to help others catch up maybe and save my loved ones from making mistakes, I would appreciate it very much. You mentioned something a minute ago I liked very much. I used to do this for my daughter when she was doing her MBA. She would have to read books and write papers. She didn't have time, so I ended up reading the books and making papers for her. And some of the books were really good. You know, I enjoyed doing that. But if someone can read a book on parenting and make a lecture next week, next month, I would appreciate that very much.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair. There isn't really quick solutions for this, but the way you chose to raise your children, try to help them know people with the same background or similar background, to increase the compatibility. There is an experience that I came to know about here in this area. I believe it's something that is worth studying. We have a community mostly Syrian, but they have few Palestinians, few Iraqis, long time ago, when they were still very young families, and probably even before getting married. Long time ago, when they came to this country, they decided to establish some sort of community that almost replaces the family relationship they left back home. So the core, I think about 10, 15, maybe families, but there is another circle revolving around them. And they managed to do it in a way that was really amazing, because their children, they think of each other as cousins. It's exactly like the same way like cousins in back home. And some of them, they get married. Some of them, they get married from this community, get married together. Recently, we have like a few weeks ago, a boy and a girl who were raised in this community, and they knew each other for a long time. They just got married. So I think that's really worth exploring, because the community in the mosque is not a community. People, they don't know each other really. People, they pray next to each other for years. They don't know even each other's names. But having this community by design, like you going and finding parents who have children at this similar ages, and try to build solid relationship to the point that your children will look at them as uncle and aunt. So I think that's something that is worth exploring and worth generalizing. Since we did not succeed to turn the mosque community into a real community, where people, they get to know each other deeply, very superficial relationships. As I mentioned, without exaggeration, people pray next to each other for years. They don't know even each other's names. Until we succeed to turn the mosque community into a true community, this initiative, I think it's really worth. If we were not able to do it, our generations, I think we should encourage future generation to do it. We should encourage future generation to have that 4, 5, 6 families who are at the same stage in life, with children at very similar ages, and try to really bond together so that and that can create the environment for people to get to know each other closely, and to have those very solid marriages. I totally agree about the fact that there is a resistance of young people here to their parents' attempts to push them in one way or another for marriage. They just want to make that decision on their own. Most boys and girls in this country have that attitude, and it's not bad. We just have to help them making the right choice. But at the end of the day, when they make their own decision, they take responsibility. When you push something on them, then they will hold you responsible. It's your fault. It's your problem. So encourage them to make the right choice, and to take charge and be responsible. It's not bad, but it comes down to communities have to start offering these services. Community have to start offering these services, and even with baby steps, for people to get to know each other, and to have those marriages that are built on very solid foundations. People who really get to knew each other, had frank discussions, reduced or eliminated surprises, increased compatibility, or increased the chances for the success of the marriage.
May I add very quick? I love the hadith that says اعمل لدنياك كأنك تعيش أبدا واعمل لآخرتك كأنك تموت غدا. Work for this life as if you live forever, work for the hereafter as if you die tomorrow. I will take that and twist it a little bit, because everything we said here has to do with us coming to terms with the fact that most of us are coming to this country to stay. Because unless we accept that and we keep living our life here as if we are leaving next year and going back home, it's an extremely big obstacle. I'm facing it in my business, if you allow me to say that, because I work with financial solutions, and financial solutions mainly are long term. Most people say, no, in 2-3 years, I'll be going back home, so I don't need that. Nobody goes back home, brothers. We're staying here for I don't know how long. I wish to go home myself. But we need to come to grasp with the idea that we are here to stay. Unless we protect ourselves, our children, our communities for the next generation and the third generation, then we are completely at a loss.
Especially now, I mean, it became very obvious that more and more countries, more and more Muslim countries, unfortunately, are not even an option for people to go back to them. We have seen one after the other. People, there are a list of Muslim countries to which people used to go back easily. Now it's not even on the table. It's not an option. So it became much more serious. And I very early on, I mean, very early on, I was telling people, plan to stay, because if you plan to stay and then you decide to go back home, it's very easy transition. You have a house that you purchase, you can sell. You have a car that is a good car, you can sell it, etc. But if you plan to go home and you don't go home, that's very bad. You spend all your life here living as someone who is in transition and you never settle. So if you, even if plan to stay, even if you decide later on to go home, your transition will be very smooth. But if you do the other way around, you can be always in limbo forever. All your life, you live it in limbo. You don't know, are you staying or going home? Yes, Brother Hugh.
I think that idea of not going home and being part of the community, trying to be part of the community, is an important thing to consider. One of the things that's going on right now in the United States in terms of ethnic groups is that more this United States is still a white dominant culture, but there are more of the ethnic groups that are intermarrying with the white culture, and so that culture is getting smaller. The proportion of white, quote unquote, pure whites is getting smaller and smaller. And one of the arguments is that this is going to help reduce the tension between groups, because if you're one of your children is married to somebody of a different ethnic group, you're going to start knowing that ethnic group better and so forth. I don't know what's going on in terms of intermarriage between different religions. We've been talking about that today. But I would argue that those who can make a good marriage that are of two different religions are doing what you were talking about in the Quran, in that Allah made people different so that you can get to know each other, and that those people are truly trying to get to know each other. And their successful cross-religious marriages are an exception. But they're also the cutting edge, I think, of this trend to try to get to know each other better. And so I would say we shouldn't frown on them. I said we should support them. I totally agree, and psychology agrees, that people who are more similar tend to have longer term, more successful marriages. I agree with that. I agree very much with the idea of counseling these people and talking to the people about that. Nonetheless, I would put in a plug for those minority people who are able to make a cross-religious marriage work, because they are helping to reduce the differences and the tensions between the different groups.
That's true. That's true. I mean, if they can make it work, it can be a good bridge between communities, etc. But what we're saying is that for the general masses, the chances for success of that kind of marriage is very small. and the challenges are greater. Especially that these couple are not disconnected, they also belong to families. And bridging the gaps between those families also become a challenge. So I agree that if it works, it can be great in reducing tension, getting people to know each other more. But in general, the chances for it to succeed is not really high. And part of encouraging compatibility and reducing the risks and increasing the chances for success of marriage, people should try to look for greater common ground. And religion is essential because, as I said, even if the couple can overcome those differences and can manage them, children may have a bigger challenge, or they may, the family can have bigger challenge raising their children, because there is this extra dimension, which is religion, how we're going to raise them. That's a different new issue that they can avoid if there is compatibility. So when I mentioned, again, I'm talking about compatibility, not only religion. I'm talking about even if people are similar when it comes to religion and culture and that social level of education, and etc., there is still issue of compatibility between the persons themselves, personalities. That's by itself, even if everything else is common, we still have big challenge to make sure that the two personalities are compatible. But if you're adding one or more of those challenges, then the risk increases, and it may be more difficult. So I have seen people that they have almost everything in common, and still the personalities are totally incompatible. That the communication broke early on in marriage, and they didn't go anywhere, just because the incompatibility between the personality, there is nothing else different except that the two persons are not compatible.
If I can follow up on the very original question, Dr. Ghannouchi, that much of the discussion, of course, focused towards, say, a person of, say, 25 years, 26 years old who wants to start a new life and go to marriage. That's for that individual, be that a male or a female. But at a higher level of generation, say, if I'm a father, 50-year-old, and I want to kind of suggest, or sometimes even more than suggest, drive to get my child to accept something that I think is more appropriate. This obviously is a different part of the discussion where we, the older generation, are probably setting up the new or young generation for added complications. Just as a follow-up example, if I press on to my child and then that child becomes defiant and resistant, like one of our colleagues pointed out, that the new generation is resistant about the choice of being kind of dictated for the highest level of interaction. That certainly will present more complications in the family structure between the parental level and the children level and the siblings that would be associated with it. So those are also aspects of family life that is subject to some level of pressure or stress.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate that people don't realize that this parenting business is very challenging, even with no extra challenges or extra problems. For example, people who are born and raised in a culture or country and raise their children in the same country and the same culture, that's by itself is challenging because time is changing and life is evolving. So there is that generation challenge by itself. Now, majority of Muslims in this country, the vast majority of Muslims were born and raised in a very different culture, very different time. Even that culture has changed completely in their original countries. And then they come to raise their children here and they want to raise them like they were themselves were raised in a different country, in a different era. And they cannot really, I don't know how to describe this, but it's really people, definitely these people are not doing themselves a favor, and they're making their lives and the life of their children hell unnecessarily, because you are fighting a losing battle. You're not going to win that. It's not going to happen. You will never be able to raise your child in 2023 in America the way you were raised in 1970 or 80 or 60 in country X. It's not going to happen. So you are fighting a losing battle. That's one. Second, that culture that you have, not necessarily a great one. It's already have some elements that are not very healthy, not very positive. So why you want to duplicate it? Number three, what you should focus on with your children is religion and principles and values, not habits and culture. They're going to be different. They're going to dress differently. They're going to cut their hair differently. And you need to be okay with that. It's not, if you want to win it all, you're going to end up losing the whole thing. So I see it time and again, especially this transition when the children become teenagers and they have that rebellious attitude and their parents are still treating them as kids and relying on just forcing their way, not convincing, not communicating, not listening. And it's really going nowhere. I know there are some, alhamdulillah, some good exceptions, but the general trend is this. The general trend is parents do not educate themselves about this role of being parents, do not educate themselves about the challenges their children are facing, do not listen to their children, do not try to understand them, do not tolerate the fact that their children are going to be different because simply they are raised in a different context, in a different time, a different culture, and that's fine. So you're going to have to be tolerant and you have to have some your margin of tolerance. Just stick to what is halal and haram and what is ethical and non-ethical, but don't fight those cultural battles that you know that you're going to end up losing, and probably with them you're going to lose the child and lose everything. So it's important to know that your children, you chose to raise them, you chose for them to be born and raised in America, so they're going to be Americans. There is nothing wrong with that. What you want them is you want to make them American Muslims, and you want to make them a good citizens, you want to make them successful in their life, in their career, you want to make them people who live by a set of values and principles. That's what you need to focus on. But focusing on raising them in America as Syrian or Palestinian or Pakistani or Afghan, it's not going to happen. I mean, you're wasting your time unnecessarily. So make sure that you don't even fight that battle, because it is a losing one, and focus on this, and then try not to force your ways. Even when they are kids, try to rely on convincing, rely on communications, avoid policing, try to build trust, try to raise them by high expectations, not by policing and by forcing your way, but always, because this expectation business is very critical. Unfortunately, a lot of parents, they do exactly the opposite. A lot of parents, they keep trashing their children. Your failure, I know you're not going to do anything. I know you're not going to succeed. Okay, if your expectations for me are very low, so don't blame me. You already have low expectations. But to have high expectations can really help your children trying to live up to those expectations. Try to be tolerant. Even when you want to teach your children or even penalize them, try to make it in a way that is constructive and not venting your anger, because I heard it from many children here, especially young adults or teenagers, saying that they feel that their parents are venting their angers in them, the angers from work or their anger from anywhere in them, because you know, the police here in this country can give you a ticket without insulting you or without offending you. I mean, with all the respect, a lot of parents in this country, that's what they do. A lot of countries here, a lot of parents in this country, when they reprimand their children, they do it very quietly. And because there is a policy, the child has violated, they know what's the consequences, and they implement that without any anger and without any. A lot of Muslim parents have to learn this, have to learn doing these things. It's like have some policies at home, and when the child violates a policy, they know exactly what's the consequences. And but to be in a very chaotic situation, sometimes you have very strong reaction for a very minor thing, and sometimes you have the smaller reaction for something bigger. That confuses children. That will make them confused. They don't know what's going on. But if you have clear policies and clear consequences, and you implement them without any anger, without anything, that can help. So no policing, try to build that trust, have the line of communications open all the time, make it safe for children to express their opinion, and even to mention to you or to their mom, to any of the parent, their mistakes and their challenges. You'd rather be aware of them so that you can help, rather than your children going and finding alternatives. And there are alternatives there. They can find somebody who's willing to listen to them, but maybe misguide them. And so there are some bad alternatives there. So having the home a safe place for people to express themselves, and minimize the number of taboos, that this is something you don't talk about it, this is something you don't say, this is have a safe place to express opinion, and even to share with you mistakes and challenges, because slipping them under the rug does not help. It's better for you that your child will come and tell you, this is what I did, this is what I've done, so that you can try to do something about it, rather than you being happy just because you don't see it. A lot to learn, a lot to learn. I keep saying that this being a spouse and being a parent are the most critical roles and jobs that we're fulfilling, and unfortunately the ones that we take lightly compared to our 9-to-5 job that we take seriously. We read about it, we learn, we try to excel in it, we try to keep it, and we are very careful about it. But these two jobs, which are much more important, because if you lose that 9-to-5 job, you can find another one. But if you fail as a spouse or parent, then there are a lot of bad consequences.
May I make a further remark before I have to leave?
Sure.
I'm going to raise something that may sound strange or offensive to some people, but I'm going to raise it anyway. When we were raised, I'm speaking for myself now, maybe my age and your age is not that far away, so we can relate to that. When it came to raising the children, running the family, dealing with people, having a religious background and a religious family, we always go back the old days, ask the sheikh, ask the imam, he will tell you what to do. Let's find a hadith, let's find a story from Sahaba, from this, how did they do that? We resisted accepting humanitarian sciences that the West have excelled in developing. I don't think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala meant for us to stick to the word of the Quran and not do our own effort to understand things better. I don't believe we were meant to imitate the community of the Sahaba or Rasulullah 1500 years ago. We've been touching on this all day today. We live in a different time. We live in a different society. We should encourage and adopt new studies, psychology, sociology, social welfare, all these good things. I think we are still very shyly accepting these things as Muslims, thinking that we are superior by going back to the hadith and going back to the Sahaba and how they did things. I have come to the conclusion after many years of struggle that the humanitarian studies available now are important, are worth looking at and studying. We don't have to accept anything and everything. We need to be critical about everything that we read or we hear, that we, bring it back to the general principles of the Quran, of Islam. But we need to go into these areas. It's not just we need, it's a necessity that we learn how to deal with the new times. I mean, for God's sake, in a few years, we have to deal with robots. I don't know if somebody's going to write a book about how to deal with robots. But we cannot keep going back to the past, how our great-great-great-grandfathers dealt with issues like this. We have to adopt the future. We have to accept what is being written, what is being studied. We have to adopt the scientific methodology, in my opinion, the one that Abraham adopted 3,000 years ago. We failed to do that until now. We want to go back to the past. We need to accept that we are looking into the future. We're trying to protect our children, our grandchildren. We have to adopt new ways. We have to study, come up with new ways, not only imitate and accept. And it's my experience, it's my opinion. I hope people take that gracefully from me. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair. Now we're going to close, inshallah, because of the time, with this great point that you brought. We'll come back, inshallah, to this more, but Quran and the Sunnah for the Prophet are meant to be guidance for life and inspiration. They are never meant to be book of science. They are not. The Quran is not book of parenting, is not book of spousal relationship. It's not book of politics. It's not. It is guidance for life and inspiration. And it encourages us to read and study and explore this world. Quran is full of verses that encourage us to explore and to contemplate and to reflect. I always say that any book that helps you become better person, better parent, better spouse, is an Islamic book. An Islamic book is not a book written by Muslims for Muslims, or that uses only the Quran and the Hadith. It's something that Allah wants you to be the best version of yourself. Anything that can help you, books about health, books about diet, books about exercise, sources about anything that can, finances, anything that can help you be better version of yourself, anything that can help you become making you stronger, making you more effective in your roles and duties. It is a wisdom that you have to be chasing. As the Prophet says, Al-Hikmah Dhallatul Mu'min. So people have to stop thinking, because Quran never claimed to be book of science, never claimed to be an alternative for all the books, and that you rely on it exclusively. And even when you do that, when you go, Quran will send you back to reflect and contemplate on this universe and try to understand how this universe ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض. They contemplate and they reflect. So we'll come back more to this because that's a very good point. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize that you should not be afraid to read from any source as long you have that critical thinking, and as long you're not taking anything, you're not going to take anything from anyone for granted until you scrutinize it, even if it comes from a scholar of Islam. You're going to still asking why and how, etc. As long as you have that critical mind, then you should not be afraid of reading from any source. We'll come back to this, inshallah, next Sunday. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much.
Alaikum assalam.